Welcome, esteemed viewers, to a chilling expedition into the realms of fear and folklore. Today we delve into the harrowing world of the Windigo, an embodiment of insatiable hunger, despair, and the supernatural. Prepare yourselves as we unravel three spine-tingling narratives that explore the sinister encounters with this legendary creature that haunts the cold wilderness. From the depths of the forest to the edges of our darkest imaginations, these stories will not only chill your bones, but also leave an indelible mark on your psyche. So gather close and brace yourselves, for the shadows are stirring. Join us as we unveil these tales of terror, if you dare. Story 1. A remote village in the heart of the Canadian wilderness, shrouded in winter's grasp. The town, nestled among towering pines, has long been rumored to be haunted by a Windigo, a creature born from hunger and despair. As snow began to blanket the village, the townsfolk felt the familiar chill creeping into their bones. Old legends spoke of a Windigo, a malevolent spirit that prowled the woods during the harshest winters, preying on the weak and desperate. Nora, a young nurse who had recently moved to the village for work, was skeptical of such tales. One evening, as the snow fell relentlessly, she received a call from the hospital. A local man had gone missing after venturing into the woods to gather firewood. With a sense of duty, Nora bundled up and set out with her colleague, Alex, to search for the man. As they ventured deeper into the forest, the air grew colder, and an eerie silence enveloped them. Shadows danced among the trees, and a feeling of being watched settled over Nora. She dismissed it as paranoia, until they found the man's tracks, leading further into the darkness. Following the tracks, they came upon an old hunting cabin, its door ajar. Inside, they found a disheveled man huddled in a corner, his eyes wide with terror. He muttered about the hunger, and how he had felt it creeping closer while he searched for wood. He spoke of voices echoing in the woods, calling out to him, promising warmth and comfort. "Did you see it?" Nora asked, her heart racing. The man only shook his head, tears streaming down his face. "I heard it. I heard it calling." Suddenly, the temperature dropped further, and the wind howled, drowning out their voices. Alex, uneasy, suggested they leave, but as they turned to go, a low growl rumbled from the shadows outside. Nora and Alex exchanged worried glances, their breaths visible in the freezing air. The man in the cabin went silent, his eyes darting to the windows, wide with fear. As the growling intensified, Nora urged them to leave, but the man, now a shell of his former self, begged them to stay. "If you go out there, it will find you. It wants me." Ignoring his pleas, they decided to leave, but as they stepped outside, a bone-chilling scream echoed through the trees. The man in the cabin collapsed, clutching his head, consumed by his own terror. Nora and Alex sprinted back to the village, hearts pounding, only to find the streets eerily quiet. The village was deserted, windows darkened, as if everyone had vanished into thin air. They reached the hospital, where Nora's instincts kicked in. She checked the patients, but the beds were empty. A chilling realization set in. The Windigo had come for the village. The night grew long, and the wind howled outside, a mournful song that seemed to beckon them. As Nora and Alex huddled in the nurse's station, they spoke of the legends. The Windigo, born from insatiable hunger, was said to consume not just flesh but souls. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and a deep, resonant voice echoed through the halls, whispering their names. Nora felt a cold grip on her heart. It was as if the shadows were alive, reaching for her. "Alex, we need to find the others," she said, fear gnawing at her insides. They ventured through the darkened halls, calling for anyone, but only silence responded. The air was thick with a sense of dread. In one of the rooms, they discovered a group of villagers huddled together, eyes wide with fear. They had barricaded themselves, convinced the Windigo was coming for them. The atmosphere was suffocating, filled with despair. "What do we do?" one of the villagers cried out, desperation creeping into his voice. Nora remembered the old tales. Those who faced the Windigo needed to confront their own fears, to resist its call. "We need to stay together," she urged, rallying the frightened villagers. As they fortified their position, the growls grew louder, echoing from every corner of the building. Shadows slithered along the walls, and a chilling wind swept through the halls, extinguishing the lights. "Stay calm," Alex shouted, but panic set in as the growls turned into guttural laughter. It felt as if the very walls were alive, closing in on them. Suddenly, the door burst open, and the creature emerged, a towering figure with gaunt features, its eyes hollow, a visage of unending hunger. The Windigo stared at them, its breath icy and rancid. "Join me," it whispered, its voice laced with promises of warmth and safety. The villagers trembled, some falling to their knees, overwhelmed by the call of the creature. But Nora stood firm. "We will not give in," she shouted, her voice cutting through the terror. "You will not take us." In that moment, the creature hesitated, as if her defiance struck a chord. The villagers rallied behind her, their strength growing in unity. They faced the Windigo together, recalling the warmth of their community, the love they shared. As the Windigo lunged, they joined hands, their resolve igniting a flicker of hope. They recited the stories of their ancestors, the tales of bravery and love that defied the darkness. The creature recoiled, its form flickering like a dying flame. "Your hunger is not greater than our bond," Nora declared, and with that, a blinding light erupted from their joined hands. The Windigo screamed, a sound of anguish and rage, as the light engulfed it, purging the darkness. In the aftermath, the village returned to life. The oppressive air lifted, and the warmth of dawn broke through the long winter night. The villagers emerged from their hiding places, filled with relief and disbelief. Nora and Alex stood at the edge of the forest, watching as the sun rose, dispelling the remnants of the Windigo's terror. They had faced the darkness and won, bound together by the strength of their shared humanity. The legend of the Windigo lived on, but now it was a story of resilience and courage. The villagers would always remember the winter when they faced the frozen echoes of despair, and emerged stronger, forever changed. Story 2. An isolated village in the northern Canadian wilderness, deep within a snowbound valley. The winters are long and unforgiving, and tales of the Windigo haunt the locals. In the heart of winter, the village of Cedar Hollow lay cloaked in a thick blanket of snow. The villagers spoke in hushed tones of the Windigo, a spirit that represented insatiable hunger and despair. This winter felt different. An ominous chill lingered in the air, and shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally long. Emily, a young journalist from the city, arrived in Cedar Hollow to cover the local folklore and the rumored sightings of the Windigo. Eager for a break from her fast-paced life, she was intrigued by the legends. As she settled into the village inn, she found the locals wary and guarded, reluctant to speak of the spirit. One night, she met Tom, a reclusive trapper known for his extensive knowledge of the woods. Over a crackling fire, Emily pressed him for stories. He hesitated before finally sharing his encounter with the Windigo from years past. "I saw it in the woods, eyes like ice and hunger that chilled me to my bones," he said, his voice low. It was searching for something, or someone. Intrigued by Tom's story, Emily decided to explore the woods the next day. Armed with her camera and notebook, she set off, determined to find evidence of the Windigo. The forest was eerily quiet, the only sound being the crunch of snow beneath her boots. As she walked deeper, the trees loomed like ancient sentinels, their branches heavy with frost. After a few hours, she stumbled upon an old abandoned hunting cabin, its door creaking in the wind. Inside, the air was stale, and remnants of a life long gone surrounded her. Faded photographs, broken furniture, and the lingering scent of decay. While exploring, Emily discovered strange symbols carved into the walls, markings that seemed to tell a story of desperation and fear. Suddenly, the temperature dropped, and a low growl echoed outside. Heart racing, she turned to leave but found the door jammed. Panicking, she pounded on the door, yelling for help. Just as she felt despair creeping in, the door burst open, and Tom stood there, eyes wide with concern. "Get out!" he shouted, pulling her into the frigid air. Back in the village, Emily was shaken. Tom explained that the Windigo thrived on fear and despair, and the longer she stayed in the woods, the more it would feed on her vulnerability. The villagers were growing uneasy, and reports of missing persons began to surface. That night, Emily awoke to the sound of whispers outside her window. She peered out into the snow-covered street and saw figures moving, shadows that seemed to twist and contort. The wind carried fragmented voices calling her name, begging for help. Unable to shake the feeling of dread, Emily decided to investigate further. She approached the village's elder, an old woman named Agnes, who had lived through countless winters. The Windigo isn't just a creature, Agnes warned, her voice steady yet haunted. It's a reflection of our darkest fears. When the hunger takes hold, it transforms us into something monstrous. Emily and Tom stumbled back, hearts pounding. The Windigo reached out, its elongated fingers brushing against Emily's cheek. A wave of despair washed over her. Visions of her past failures and fears engulfed her. "Fight it!" Tom shouted, snapping her back to reality. "It feeds on your weakness." Summoning her strength, Emily focused on the circle of markings. "You are not real. You are a manifestation of fear," she declared, her voice steady. The Windigo recoiled, and the air crackled with tension. "You cannot escape your hunger," it snarled, inching closer. But Emily's determination solidified. "We are more than our fears," she cried, stepping into the circle. "We are stronger together." Determined to confront her fears, Emily ventured back into the woods with Tom. Armed with a lantern and a newfound sense of resolve, they navigated the labyrinth of trees. The atmosphere was suffocating, the air thick with an otherworldly presence. As they reached the abandoned cabin, Emily felt a strange pull. Inside, she began to notice more symbols on the floor, creating a circle. Tom urged her to leave, but something compelled her to stay. "It's a summoning circle," she whispered, tracing her fingers over the markings. They were trying to contain it. Before Tom could respond, a bone-chilling wind swept through the cabin. The shadows converged, coalescing into a figure, the Windigo. Its form was a grotesque blend of human and beast, eyes glinting like shards of ice. "Join me," it hissed, its voice echoing in the confined space, laced with hunger. The moment she spoke those words, a bright light erupted from the circle, pushing back the shadows. The Windigo screeched, its form flickering as if caught between worlds. Tom joined her, hands clasped. "We will not succumb," he shouted, his voice resonating with the energy of the circle. The light intensified, illuminating the cabin and dispelling the darkness that threatened to engulf them. The Windigo writhed, its power waning as the combined strength of their wills overwhelmed it. In one final roar of rage and despair, the creature shattered into a million fragments, scattering into the night. As dawn broke over the valley, the village was silent, the air crisp and clean. Emily and Tom emerged from the cabin, hearts racing, but filled with a sense of accomplishment. The weight of fear had lifted. The villagers gathered, their faces etched with concern, but when they saw Emily and Tom return, a sense of hope spread through the crowd. "You did it!" Agnes exclaimed, tears of relief shining in her eyes. "You faced the darkness." The tales of the Windigo would continue, but now they were stories of resilience and courage. The villagers learned to confront their fears together, finding strength in unity. As winter melted into spring, the village of Cedar Hollow began to thrive once more. Emily decided to stay, sharing stories and documenting the resilience of the villagers. The Windigo became a legend of the past, a reminder that darkness could be overcome with courage and community. Together, they forged a new path, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that they were stronger than their fears. The echoes of hunger faded into the shadows, replaced by the warmth of hope and unity. Story 3. A remote village named Pine Hollow, nestled deep in a snow-covered forest. Winter has fully settled in, and a sense of unease hangs in the air. The village of Pine Hollow lay blanketed in snow, the biting wind whistling through the trees. It was mid-January, and the locals whispered nervously about the return of the Windigo, a spirit said to embody hunger and despair. Maggie, a young woman new to the village, had come to escape the chaos of city life. Intrigued by the local folklore, she settled into a cozy cabin at the edge of the woods, hoping to write a book about the legends. One night, while sipping hot cocoa by the fire, she overheard a group of villagers at the inn discussing recent disappearances. "They say the Windigo is back," one of the men murmured, his voice trembling. "It preys on the lonely, the desperate." Maggie felt a chill creep up her spine, but brushed it off as superstition. After all, she was a writer, not a believer in ghosts. Still, curiosity tugged at her. Determined to understand the tales, she ventured into the forest the next day, armed with her notebook and camera. The trees loomed like silent watchers, and the deeper she walked, the more oppressive the silence became. Suddenly, a low growl echoed through the air. Startled, she turned, heart racing. "Just an animal," she whispered to herself. But as she continued, the feeling of being watched intensified. After an hour, Maggie stumbled upon an old hunting cabin, its door ajar. Inside, the air was stale and cold. The walls were adorned with strange symbols, etched into the wood. In the center of the room lay an old, weathered journal. She picked it up and began to read. The entries were frantic, detailing the author's descent into madness during a long winter. "The Windigo calls," one entry read. "It promises warmth, but it only takes." Maggie felt a shiver run down her spine. Just then, a bone-chilling wind swept through the cabin, and the growl returned, louder and more menacing. She dropped the journal, panic flooding her senses, and bolted for the door. Outside, the world was alive with howling winds and swirling snow. She raced back toward the village, glancing over her shoulder, half expecting to see the creature lurking behind her. As she reached the inn, breathless and trembling, she burst through the door. The villagers turned, concern etched on their faces. "The Windigo," she gasped. "It's real." Mrs. Thompson, the innkeeper, nodded gravely. "It feeds on fear and isolation. We've all felt it in our own ways." That night, Maggie sat with the villagers, listening to their stories. They shared tales of loved ones who had vanished. Their absence felt like a gaping wound in the community. The Windigo thrived on despair, they said, and winter was its season. Determined to confront her fears, Maggie returned to the woods the next day. This time, she brought the villagers with her, a group united against the looming darkness. Together, they formed a circle in front of the old cabin, chanting words of protection. As the wind howled, the growl echoed again, but this time it felt distant. The group stood firm, their voices rising above the chaos. Suddenly, a blinding light erupted from the center of the circle, pushing back the shadows. The Windigo's form materialized, a grotesque figure of hunger and despair, but it hesitated, faltering in the light. With a final roar, it dissipated into the wind, leaving only silence in its wake. Breathless, the villagers looked at each other, relief washing over them. They had faced the darkness together and emerged victorious. The legend of the Windigo would live on, but it now served as a reminder of their strength and unity. As spring began to thaw the ice and snow, Maggie realized she had found more than a story in Pine Hollow. She had discovered a community bound by resilience. The whispers of the Windigo faded, replaced by laughter and hope as the village reclaimed its spirit. The shadows are restless tonight, and so are we. If you're brave enough, hit that like button. Let us know what you think in the comments, and subscribe for more spine-tingling stories that lurk just around the corner.